So this talk is actually quite lowbrow, lots of lols and gifs from experience reports of what we've done so far. So just as a bit of background, I run Open Sensors. We're an IoT company. And actually ThingMonk has a special place in my heart because this is, ThingMonk marks the anniversary of Open Sensors. We launched 2 years ago with this idea that open data is actually quite crucial to IoT, and people like it. They've taken it on. So I kind of want to say we're still alive, And I think a round of applause actually is necessary for the startups. So Patrick with Chirp, Matt, I think Dara has his thing, OpenTRV, the Flood Network. These guys are the ones I've seen over the last few years, and I'm kind of really happy to be part of this community, of the London community, doing quite exciting things. So well done, guys. And can we have a round of applause for those guys, please? So enough navel gazing. The secret life of buildings is the theme of this talk. Essentially what we run is we kind of are trying to become a message broker for IoT. And we combine open data where people can publish and subscribe to open data. And I think right now we're at around 7 or 8 million messages a day of our open data. And so people are publishing lots and lots of air quality data, weather information, just quite fairly random stuff sometimes, but very, very interesting. And what does that have to do with buildings? But actually, quite a lot, it turns out. When you're talking about designing systems for the kind of the physical space, nothing is an island, right? A building doesn't exist in its own. So if you put some sensors around inside a building, what's going on outside of it affects what goes on inside. So air quality outside impacts the air quality inside. So understanding that, and being able to get many, many variables makes, I suppose, the risk of execution easier because you don't have to keep redeploying sensors. You can take what other people have publishing, combine it with your own information, and then you have intelligence, right? That thing that we're seeking with IoT. So essentially, data plus context gives you information and insights, as Dave said. And that doesn't come from one sensor. That does not come from putting an air quality sensor in a corner. Doesn't really kind of give you insight. You get it when you have multiple variables, clean data that you can surface in an easy way. And also, when you talk about the buildings context, actually they've been doing this for years. We don't call it IoT, funny enough, but they have been doing automation for years. You go into a space and you're very used to walking in, lights come on in commercial buildings. And that's automation, right? That's M2M. It's just that it's not surfaced to the internet as such, it's not broadcast. And, but there's that data, but there's also the newer data. So research has shown in a lot of commercial spaces, there's this idea of healthy and sick buildings. And really what you're talking about is, does it have good ventilation? It's shown that bad ventilation it costs businesses money. Understanding the utilization of spaces, whether it's kind of meeting rooms to floor spaces, and understanding whether they're using it to the maximum capacity is hugely important. And so is things like operational efficiency. Can we use these spaces and design these spaces in the best way possible that cater to the UX of these buildings? But you can't do this alone. You can't do this with one deployment. You need to be able to take into account traffic data, footfall data inside and outside of the building, and really stitch them together. And this is, this is the way that we are helping people design systems, especially around the built environment. And we have to what we're saying is that we have to kind of teach big businesses who are used to doing things in a certain way to act like startups. Because in the IoT space, everyone is a startup, which is great, because we can kind of show them how to create and design systems from scratch. So you're talking about, user needs first? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to, kind of lower the cost? Are you trying to say, well, if I have a space where people are working from home quite a lot, can I have 80% of my desk spaces instead of 100%? And in London, desk spaces cost you around, in central London, around 12 grand a year. So if you can actually shave off a few percentage points if you can optimize the usage, you're talking about quite a lot of money. And these are kind of useful things that IoT can do, rather than this whole kind of, yay, we're going to make trillions of pounds type slide. So what do? You start with the user needs first, and you get them to understand their needs. And then you start identifying the sensors and the data. What data do you already have? Some of our clients are starting to stitch together the HR data and the environmental data. Are we creating nice spaces that people want to work in? Can we reduce absenteeism? I mean, it sounds kind of cynical, but actually it's about trying to create better spaces that people want to work in, and healthier spaces. And then you start saying, how do we structure the messages, and you kind of get into the nitty-gritty of things. I will tweak this out later. You can take it, interrogate it for your own uses. And whilst we've done a few workshops, and a certain theme has come in, which has been quite staggering, because I've been, I suppose, in the should we say, Web 2.0 space for long enough that I take some things for granted. And what the theme that comes up is that people can't get their data. They kind of know how to slice and dice data. Data science in terms of taking Python and IPython and hacking around and slicing data and data actually has become normalized. The theme is that companies don't allow them to get their data. They can't get their BMS data. They can't get the energy reading data. The services that people are giving them are, here's a clamp, here's a dashboard. If I want to download it, I can't get the data for most of the services that are being created. And that's really a shame. I think that we're letting our customers down when we do these kind of things. So really, IoT turns out into becoming a kind of a data integration, system integration issue. I want to get existing data sets, new data sets, combine them together. I want to combine it with the asset information. So if you're talking about a room, there's already building asset management information. They know how many chairs and meeting rooms and so on exist. You need to combine, if you're going to deploy data sets, you need to be able to combine these schemas. And I don't see anyone thinking about this stuff, which is interesting in a way, because a lot of people are still talking about protocols. There's new protocols every day, but we're not talking about how do we integrate. Can we surface building management systems as, say, a JSON schema to say, okay, Canary Wharf, this is my schema, and here's all the placements of my meeting rooms to desks to everything else. And then you can go in with a bunch of sensors, do a deployment, combine it together, and give people insight, actual information about what they're trying to say, rather than yet another system. And like I said, I mean, I've kind of mentioned this. So I'm gonna skim through, but kind of getting buildings as a data infrastructure is what is coming up. And the ideal, I suppose, scenario is this. Then these are the Berg. That was my most favorite Berg product, I have to say. The kind of the Pixel display. You want intelligent signage. You want people to come into a space. And if it's a hospital, you want to know how long you're going to wait. A simple thing. But that needs to take into account traffic information to what's going on inside the hospital. You will need to be able to automate. So you need to be able to say, these are little widgets. I don't know if you can see them clearly, but they're ThingStudio. I don't know if you guys know, another London startup. They're making interfaces for IoT. So if you want to create, I've got a connected light. I want to have an app to turn it on and off. They give you an easy app, and that can talk MQTT. So, very, very easy. Then you can create something. We sat down, we created a couple of things over, a couple of hours. Brilliant. That's what you want to do. But you want to be able to create interfaces. People don't like to see, obviously, don't like to see command lines. But we haven't, and that all seems to be coming together, I think. And this is a chat that I had kind of just stepping back a bit. What is IoT? And this is a chat I had with somebody in the IoT community, and they said, well, actually, why is a Z-Wave device considered IoT when buildings have been doing this for years? They have Modbus, they have BACnet. And we're not kind of taking that. Just because it's wired rather than wireless, is it not an IoT device? And I think that's the underlying theme, is like the devices already exist within buildings. You just need them to talk to your system and to talk to multiple systems. So from now on, it's just going to be GIFs and telling you why it's not happening. So whilst we're creating new protocols, it turns out that a bunch of other protocols exist for buildings. BACnet has been around from 1987, right? A building automation tool. Everyone uses BACnet. It's not in Shoreditch. There's no open source tools to go with it. There's no kind of JavaScript node applications, but it is a substantial tool. DALI is a lighting management tool. It's been around since 1984. Everyone uses DALI. Same for Modbus, 1979. And we're not integrating with these things. You know, the IoT community is doing one thing, and then the building management kind of people are doing this. We're progressing without any kind of bridges. And this is really what we're trying to change. But we have to take into consideration their needs. And one of the things is the edge computing is very, very important. These systems, you've got the Canary Wharf group with 30-odd floors. You can't say, well, AWS East has gone down. Nobody can come down the elevators, or your HVAC systems are not going to work. Lol. So having a sense of, there has to be enough edge computing there to enable to kind of have a hybrid between what we know of as kind of pure IoT, which is everything goes into the cloud. The logic still has to be there, and we need to be able to enable it to, but we need to talk through it. And as far as I can see so far, none of the kind of integration points exist. And we started integrating, and I'll get to that in a minute. I spent about 3 or 4 days last year at a gallery in Birmingham. I don't know, does anybody actually go into the basements of these large companies? So that's the BMS system. So they said, okay, we want to get data from that into the cloud. Can you do it? And I turned up with my Emacs kind of going, yeah, we're not in Kansas anymore. Right? There is no USB port to get data out of that. And I really kind of, I reassessed my life choices that day. It was definitely interesting. So, but these things are not going anywhere, right? Our startup would die before those things do. These are on 15 to 20-year contracts. So you have to learn how to work with this stuff. Existing systems that are not going anywhere, they've paid from 50 grand upwards to 200 grand for this stuff. So I said, well, there must be a way. Surely it's a computer. It's not a usual computer, but it must be a way to talk to it. So I called up the company and I said, hey, do you have an API? And they went, and literally, that is what happened. The guy on the phone went, and I went, right, so you don't know. So that's a no then. And I thought, well, maybe it's impossible. And actually it is. If you think about it logically, they kind of, it is possible. And we started this kind of thinking and project of trying to say, well, if we can create some open source tooling to get data out of these BMS systems, and there is about 5 of them, 5 major ones, from Modbus to BACnet and the brands, then we're kind of flying, because then you have this dream of everything, the kind of integrating. And that's really, this is what Open Census is, right? We need to get systems talking to each other. We need to make data available. Some are public data sets, so everyone has access. But really, on the private side, the aim is to say, people should get access to their data. They've paid for these systems, and they should be able to slice and dice it, integrate with other systems. And I'm kind of, by the way, I have to say, I'm sure this group is enlightened, but I am seeing companies in 2015, early 2016, creating systems that Again, don't let people access their data. And if you don't, you're George Bush, right? Like, I think of you as that George Bush guy. So please don't do that. But I'm sure no one in this group does. So no more silos. Let's get things talking to each other with a good enough security that we're still protecting people's privacy, but also getting to a stage where, let's just move forward. So Wi-Fi. One note about Wi-Fi. We've deployed a bunch of sensors with Wi-Fi, and just don't do it. So what happened? Again, another lol is you turn up with about 100 to 500 sensors in corporate offices, and IT security goes, where are you putting that? So the fights that you have to create deployments with Wi-Fi and the kind of the edge, shall we say, dependencies on other people. Natalia is going to talk tomorrow about BPTO, so I won't kind of ruin her story, but one of the things was, so we had these sensors, and people were putting them in their back gardens, and it was great. But we had people change the Wi-Fi password. So you're like, oh my God! And everything is on the firmware. Most Wi-Fi kind of, at least microprocessors that I've come across, don't let you do remote management. So you're like, okay, you're trying to talk people to the configuration side. And there was this one guy. He would, every time he left the house, he would turn off his Wi-Fi. And you're just like, Jesus Christ, don't do it. There are better ways. And this is the kind of the stack that we've come across. This is Lawrence, actually, he runs the Industrial Internet Group or company. And this is the stack that we're kind of, I suppose, settling on these days. So you have, the BMS systems, the lighting management systems, smart metering, all coming in via a hub, a gateway. And this gateways, we're kind of stepping out of the Wi-Fi side and running LoRa, which seems to be actually has a lot of promise. I know that OpenTRV talked about the Things network, but you also can run the private networks, private LoRa networks. So a couple of these galleries are now running these LoRa networks, and that means that in a building you've got a private network, you've got all of their data coming in. And then you can do your sensor deployments. And actually, there's not that many sensors that are necessary. If you can get the other data sets, you don't need thousands of sensors for a building. You need maybe a few hundred, right? And then you gather it all up. I mean, we process it via MQTT. And ThingStudio is starting to take care of the interface side. And that seems comfortable, right? We're not kind of talking about years of developing something or even a year of developing something. You can go in, develop something in a month, and you're out, right? And they can run it themselves. And the LoRa gateways that we're using allow remote device management, so they can kind of you can support them. And I'd be interested to know what you think of this, because there's a lot of quite experienced people here. It would be interesting to exchange some notes, see how you're getting on. But this is kind of what we're settling down on. We're just getting started. I mean, the aim is to really create enough interfaces, open source interfaces here, that other people don't have to sit in a basement and cry. And we can collaborate, right? Open source and open data for the win. And that is my story. And hopefully it's different enough that you're not bored of me after all these years at ThingMonk. Thank you.